Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon, depending on which class you are and when you're hearing this. I do apologize for not being there today. However, my daughter has strep throat, so I can't be in, period. I will be back tomorrow, so we'll pick up wherever you left off from here. I do want you to know that I will be posting a link on Google Classroom for my first, second, and third period classes. So that those of you who didn't get all the notes in class, or if it went a little too fast for you, you can go back in and double check your information and rewrite whatever it is that you need. So there will be a link for this. Today's starting a new unit, so I need everybody to take a moment to create their new unit page. So make your fold so that it goes over and you create your little pocket like we normally do. This section is called A Young Nation. We will cover Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe. So please pause the video so that you can do this now. Okay, so at this point you should have created your new unit page. Your first blank page within the unit should be the Jefferson presidency. Your essential question is, what were the policies and historical events associated with Jefferson's presidency? Again, remember to pause the video when necessary so that everybody can get the information. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that you will not be writing everything today. You know how this works. I'm going to go through several slides and I will let you know when you are to start writing again. If you have any questions about anything that we've talked about or that we talk about on each of the slides, please remember to write those questions in your margin. Do not forget to write them down, because then when I come back, you're not going to remember what your question was. All right, so we're not writing this slide, you're just listening. In the election of 1800, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were the two primary candidates. As you'll recall from previous classes, John Adams was a Federalist and Thomas Jefferson was a Democratic Republican. The Federalists, John Adams, believed that the nation was in danger of being ruined by radicals who supported the violence of the French Revolution, whereas the Democratic Republicans, led by Thomas Jefferson, believed that the Federalist policies, such as the Alien and Sedition Acts, would lead to monarchy and oppression. Keeping in mind that John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were truly very good friends, but they had very different ideas of what government should look like. In the election of 1800, the results were simple. John Adams had 65 electoral votes, Thomas Jefferson had 73, and Aaron Burr had 73. Remember, John Adams lost popularity after the Alien and Sedition Acts, so at this point he wasn't even in the running for the presidency. Now, still not writing. According to the Constitution, in instances of a tie, the House of Representatives would decide who would be president. Hamilton was Jefferson's bitter rival, but it's important to note that Hamilton actually disliked Aaron Burr even more so than he disliked Thomas Jefferson, and that's saying a lot. So Hamilton will use his influence to persuade Congress to vote for Jefferson so that Aaron Burr could not, under any circumstances, be President of the United States. As a result, Jefferson becomes president and Aaron Burr became vice president. Now, this leads to a whole set of events. Hamilton and Burr cannot stand each other. They're political rivals for years and years and years. Both of them are known for saying vicious things about the other and it ending up in the newspaper. The men absolutely hate each other. It is something that they had no problem hiding from each other and definitely no problem voicing. So Burr believed that he lost the presidential election because of Hamilton. For the most part, he's right. When Burr tried to run for governor of the state of New York in 1804, again, he had to deal with Hamilton. Hamilton used his influence to make sure that Burr did not become governor of New York. Later that year, someone published some remarks that Hamilton had made in a newspaper, and Burr responded by challenging Hamilton to a duel. As a result, in July of 1804, Hamilton and Burr meet on the coast of New Jersey. Each will fire a shot from their pistol. Burr is untouched. However, Hamilton fell to the ground. He is mortally wounded and will die the next day. So, unfortunately for us, this is how one of our most influential founding fathers dies, because of a heated argument with Aaron Burr that had lasted for many years. Now, back to Jefferson. In Jefferson's first inaugural address, he focused on trying to calm the nation's political quarrels. His inaugural address excerpt that should be remembered is, "Let us then, fellow citizens, unite with one heart and one mind. Every difference of opinion is not a difference of principle. We are all Republicans. We are all Federalists." He's going to take this particular statement to heart, and he and John Adams will forgive each other, and the two will become the best of friends again, and will, in fact, become such good friends that they will correspond with each other, meaning they'll mail each other letters on a very regular basis, and the two men will die within a couple of weeks of one another. All right, so summarize the following information. Jefferson, as we recall, is a Virginia planter. He is going to try and promote his vision for America, which was a nation of small, independent farmers. He also wanted the United States to be free from British influence and debt. Now, I'm not really sure how he expected that to happen, since he wanted everybody to be farmers. If everyone's a farmer, then nobody is making anything. They're all growing stuff, which means we would then have to deal with other countries. And if we wanted to trade with other countries, we had to buy products from them. So getting away from Britain altogether is a little ridiculous. But hey, it was Jefferson's plan. He was an agricultural man, and he wanted the United States to be agricultural. So essentially what you need to remember from this section is that Jefferson wanted to have an agricultural America. Now, whether or not that was smart, well, we've had this discussion before in many of my classes. If everybody's a farmer, we're not making, and I hope at that point you said money. Moving on to the next slide. Jefferson sought to end many of the Federalist policies. The Alien and Sedition Acts were allowed to expire. People arrested under these acts were released. Congress repealed many of the federal taxes, such as the one on whiskey, and a number of federal employees were reduced. The size of the military was also reduced, and federal funds were used to pay off the national debt. Jefferson is noted as saying, "Sometimes it is said that man cannot be trusted with the government of himself. Can he then be trusted with the government of others?" Please write this slide. Summarize where you can. If not, just write it. One of the last acts as president performed by John Adams was the signing of the Judiciary Act of 1801. This will increase the number of the federal courts. And if you increase the number of federal courts, you need to increase the number of federal judges. As a result, Adams appointed Federalists to be the judges of the new federal courts. He wants his own political party to be in charge of the federal courts, to give him an upper hand, so to speak. Adams also appointed the new Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Marshall. Highlight his name, learn it, you must know him. He was also a Federalist. Now, Adams appoints him as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and of course, I need to remind you that the Senate is required to confirm him or to give consent, and they did. John Marshall became the new Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Now, in Adams doing this, he thought he was pushing the idea of the Federalist Party. What he didn't realize and understand was that John Marshall took his job very seriously and did not allow his political party affiliation to determine how he judged in cases. Now, that being said, put a star next to it, highlight it, whatever you've got to do. This particular slide is a must. Marbury versus Madison. The Supreme Court that established the principle of judicial review. Judicial review is the principle that the Supreme Court of the United States has the final say in interpreting the Constitution. Now, we've talked about this multiple times in each of my classes, but this is the case that determines that the Supreme Court has the right to decide if a law is constitutional or unconstitutional. Now, this means that if a state passes a law that violates the Constitution in any way, then if it gets to the Supreme Court can strike down that law, which basically says it would be the Chief Justice and several of the Supreme Court justices saying, we do not agree that that law is in accordance with the Constitution. It violates Amendment number 4, or it violates Article number 1, Section 2, Part 3, whatever the case may be. But the point is that it takes away that law. Now, if on the other hand, they find that the law doesn't violate the Constitution, then the law stays in place until the people decide to vote it out or whatnot. Now, to give you a little idea of what this was about, remember those midnight appointments that Adams had made, those Federalists that he appointed to be judges? Well, one of them didn't get his he didn't get his paperwork in time. He didn't get it by midnight of the night he was supposed to get it. And so James Madison, under Jefferson's orders, took all of those midnight appointments and he threw them into the fire. Essentially, he let them burn because he wasn't going to give them the jobs. It wasn't delivered on time. Well, Marbury is going to sue and say that that job was meant for him. He already knew it was coming and that he should get it. Well, John Marshall said, no, you didn't get it in time, and there was nothing that said that James Madison and Jefferson had to hand it to you. They were not the president at the time that the invitation or the job had been given, and it had not been delivered, so Madison didn't have to give him the job. Now, that being said, Jefferson and Madison were both extremely angry at John Marshall, not because of his decision, because, that was in their favor that Marbury not get the job. They were angry because judicial review, ultimately gives the Supreme Court more power, which then gives the federal government more power. So if you would please write this bullet, the ruling gave more power to the Supreme Court. That's all you have to write. Because this giving more power to the federal government goes against everything that the Democratic Republicans opposed. So again, the ruling gave more power to the Supreme Court. Please make sure that you highlight that. Also make sure that you highlight the term judicial review, because we are going to touch base on that multiple times throughout this semester, because some judges, or rather some presidents, will follow it and some presidents will violate this. Now, at this point, you should pause if you are not caught up. If you're ready, then we can move right in. By the time Jefferson became president, there were 2 new western states. Those included Kentucky and Tennessee, who joined the Union. Ohio became the 16th state in 1803. It was part of the Northwest Territory. And as more settlers began moving west, the importance of navigating the Mississippi River and getting to the port of New Orleans is going to increase. Now, keep in mind, we don't control these things. While our border goes to the Mississippi River, France is in control of the port of New Orleans. So, at this time in France, Napoleon Bonaparte, who we discussed, has emerged, and his efforts allowed France to dominate most of the continent of Europe. Because remember, when we talked about Napoleon before, he's the guy who wants to be emperor of all of Europe. Well, the problem, of course, with that is, he needs cash. And since he needs cash, he's going to have to sell Louisiana. He's engaged in another war with Great Britain. It's costing him a lot of money, and then he's having a slave rebellion in the colony of Haiti. All of this adds together to mean lots and lots of money. So Napoleon is going to sell it to the United States. He offers to sell Louisiana to the U.S. for $15 million. Please write that in your notebook. That's about 3 cents per acre. Again, he offers to sell Louisiana to the United States for $15 million. Write this. On the one hand, Jefferson wants Louisiana to become part of the United States.